Welcome to Coverage and Coffee. My name is Casper Harsey. Joining me today is
Razak Shakor.
tell us a little bit about yourself, Razak. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Casper. And thank you for the cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I'm Razak, originally from Malaysia. I've been working in the insurance industry too long. I started my career in 1979,
Yeah.
to be exact. That's a very, very long time ago. So I've been in the insurance industry that long and across the whole spectrum of the industry. From loss adjusting to insurance broking to insurer, reinsurer, buyer
Yeah.
of insurance.
Yeah.
So that's the extent of my experience, which was great to look back.
Yeah. No, I mean, you started in the industry before, I was even born, not to make you feel old or anything, but we've worked together for a little while now, and I've definitely recognized that you have a treasure trove of insights and experience, and some of these things that we will kind of tackle today. We're going to be talking about things like, the differences in different regions when it comes to broking. We're going to be talking about different risk cultures. What's it like being in London versus somewhere else when it comes to the insurance market. And then also specifically, one of the things that we've talked a lot about in the context of our work together has been, how do brokers learn how to broke? How are the new generations broking? And then we'll kind of touch on some topics like, what the role of AI, we'll talk a little bit about those types of situations. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan for the day.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I guess your career did start a while ago, but what was the thing that brought you into insurance, right? What was your first role and what kind of brought you there?
Well, I'm a peculiar animal, Casper, because I actually, when I went to college, I was one of the young blokes who signed up for insurance as a course, and I sat for the Chartered Insurance Institute UK in Malaysia. So, to tell you the truth, in those days, in Malaysia, and I think even in the UK, in those days, if you think of an insurance, in Malaysia, you think you're going to be located somewhere near the road transport department, waiting for people to buy motor insurance.
Yeah.
And in the UK, it's like people think they're going to come and knock on your door and sell,
Yeah.
life insurance or some form of insurance. So you didn't have a clue about insurance, but it was quite a revelation when I did that course. In fact, to tell you the truth, the college I did, they had foresight in Malaysia, and they offered the UK, which is an internationally acclaimed educational program in insurance.
Yeah.
And I never looked back on it. And when we went to college, I think we had about 10 of us in the class.
Wow. Okay.
That's it. 10 of us actually subscribed. And I remember the dean saying to us that, that's not enough to pay for the dues of the lecturers and all that. So they had to force anybody who was not accepted for other courses to go into insurance. And I think it was really a 50-50 role where 50% had no choice. And they wanted to study, they went into insurance. But I don't think so any of my friends who started out with me in college looked back. They actually enjoyed insurance. So I went into insurance by sheer accident, and never looked back since that.
Yeah.
And I started work as I said, 1979.
No, I think it's really interesting the way you started that in the sense that, like, when you're outside of the insurance industry and you think about what's it going to be to work in insurance, right? Are you're going to become this insurance agent who sells personal lines insurance, right? That is how we've talked about this in many different contexts on the podcast, in the sense that most people's relationship with insurance is quite surface level in the grand scheme of how complicated insurance can be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you had mentioned that you'd worked in so many different departments, but I guess what for me, because my background in insurance is insurance broking.
Yeah.
I guess the most interesting part in your career for me is your time in insurance broking, right? So you started at...
I actually started as a loss adjuster.
Yeah.
Yeah, as an insurance loss adjuster. And even to today, if a young person comes to me and said, I want to go into insurance, I said, start as a loss adjuster. The reason is very simple. And I'm using this mantra today where I said to CEOs of insurance companies, back in Malaysia, and I'll always ask this question when they ask us to do some risk advisory work or whatever. I said, so guys, may I ask a question? What is our business? And I'll tell you, 9 out of 10 say, oh, we provide insurance, we provide protection, and that sort of atmosphere. I said, so they always ask me, I says, well, you're a veteran in insurance. Why do you ask that question? What is your view about what our business is? And I said, pardon to say, but our business is paying claims.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to pay claims, we don't have any business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I learned from my loss adjusting days, the 4 years of my initial career, was basically there's 3 components to the insurance claims. One, you've got a valid contract, which is what insurance is all about, a promise, which is a valid contract. 2, a valid incident. And 3, it's a valid amount you're claiming, and which is a simple approach to the insurance policy. It's like any insurance, very legal based.
Yeah.
So if you have those 3 things, insurance companies or brokers or whoever who deals in insurance shouldn't be thinking very hard.
Yeah.
If it meets the 3 criteria, pay the claim.
I mean, this is something we had a whole episode on claims, and this is exactly what I said as well. At the end of the day, claims is what you're paying insurance for, right? Insurance gives you peace of mind, conceptually, it gives you risk transfer, all these kinds of things. But at the end of the day, the consumer is paying for the claim to get paid out at some point, right?
Yeah.
And then, so for those who don't know, right, there's 2 types of audience members who kind of listen in: those who are within the insurance space and those who aren't. So if you are in, this is going to be a very obvious question. But when you say loss adjustment, what does that mean to the everyday person?
It means when you have a claim, by practice, you need a mediator. And the loss adjuster is a professional, qualified professional, actually. They have actually got a Institute of Loss Adjusting diplomas, just like the Chartered Insurance Institute. And the loss adjuster, this is another misconception. The loss adjuster, everybody, an insured, someone who just buy insurance, when I'm seeing a loss adjuster, I know it is as though the loss adjuster only favors the insurance company. They're employed by the insurance company, which actually is wrong. Their job is to be independent. And that had suffered a bit, I think, over the years, where loss adjusters have lost the plot because because they get paid by the insurance company.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not. When you pay a premium, when the insurance company charge a premium, it's a combination of the pure risk, the admin costs, and the cost of managing claims. So you have a right for the loss adjuster to represent you as an insured, not only just the insurance company.
Yeah.
And sometimes that gets muddled. So a lot of insureds, or just common people, consumers, do not understand that.
Yeah.
And I think this is where the insurance industry should not reinvent itself, regenerate itself, and explain that to the consumer. And I think the more you explain to the consumer, the higher your sales.
Yeah, I mean, we when we spoke on the claims episode as well, we kind of talked that the claims process has changed quite a bit, right? It is different from what it used to be. I know you've told us, you've shared anecdotes about you going on site and figuring out, okay, things don't quite add up here.
Yeah.
And I can see how understanding claims can be incredibly important in properly understanding risk, right? In properly understanding insurance. But from there, you then went into insurance broking?
I went into insurance broking because I felt, I was given the opportunity. I went to a company called Johnson & Higgins. At that material time, It's a New York-based insurance broking. It was the oldest insurance broking partnership. What I meant is that it was owned by, I'm not sure, but maybe about 20 odd partners
Mm.
who they change as they
Yeah.
retire. The next guy becomes a partner. So that was one of the unique arrangement of an organization,
Yeah,
which I felt.
that's not really a model anymore.
Yeah, it's not.
No.
Everything now is a public listed company or whatever else. But that partnership of brokers, and they were international. They were quite international. They had offices in the Far East. And they were starting in Malaysia, and I was one of the four or five guys. The guy who the American guy who came to Malaysia, interviewed. For some rhyme or reason, he was given my name by an insurance. I think it was a friend in Commercial Union at that time. Commercial Union is an old British insurance company. Now the name's now defunct. So I went for, to tell you the truth, when I went for the interview, was the best. The guy was quite good. He bought us lunch. He bought me lunch. A steak lunch in Malaysia. That's a big thing.
You were spoiled. You were spoiled.
So then I left, and then he asked me, he says, do you have any other friends who, because we're starting the operations in Malaysia. So I introduced my colleague. And my colleague, went for an interview separately. And about a month later or something like that, my colleague said, who was also in the loss adjusting firm I was in. It's a British loss adjusting firm called Graham Miller. Again, defunct. And my colleague got an offer. And then he told me, he said, I've got an offer by Johnson Higgins. I said, oh, great. I referred someone and I didn't get an offer. He got an offer. So I actually called the guy who's the MD. He's still alive and kicking, I think living in Wilmington, Delaware now. I still been in touch with him. And I said, I heard you offered my colleague a job. I said, oh, yeah. But don't worry. Can you come and meet me tomorrow? I said, so why? So I said, actually, I've got your offer letter. I said, oh, is this a knock-on effect? Or so no. I've been wanting to employ you, but we have to form a team. So we started with about 5 people.
And you were leading that team?
I wasn't. We were all equals.
Oh, okay.
He was the MD, American, and we started as young executives, 5 years in the industry, young executives. And the great thing was it was a learning curve, which was sink or swim, and we were in competition, and we ended up as a pretty good team. And we built that team under his leadership, the American guy. I'll mention his name is Robert Passmore, and we built quite a fairly good book of business in a very short period of time. The reason why we were able to do that was the international network was able to support with the technical knowledge.
Yeah.
You're 5 years in the business as a broker, and we were all non-brokers. We were insurance, but I said 2 of us were from loss adjusting, and everything else. So we built a great portfolio, but it's with the help of the international network.
Yeah.
Because the expertise came from, if you wanted somebody in a certain industry, it's there. It could be the guy in London, could be the guy in China, could be the guy wherever. So we use that. So I stayed with Johnson Higgins, and then I had the fortunate opportunity to move to Johnson Higgins in London when they first established their operations in London, and it was in 1990. I think there was.
That's really interesting. So this was an American firm that set up in Malaysia before they set up in London?
Because they at that time they were 100 over year old, but they've always had a correspondent relationship with all the London marketplace.
Right.
So their primary partner at that time was Willis, which is now Willis Towers Watson. So Willis Faber, that's what they were called those days. And we dealt with Willis if we were from Malaysia, to place businesses, reinsurance business to London and all that. So when Willis bought a competitor in the United States, Johnson Higgins was arm twisted into setting up their own operation in London.
Okay, yeah.
So the great thing was, again, I admire the head of international of Johnson Higgins at that time. And funnily enough, his name, he's passed away. His name is Mr. Bean. And I'm not talking about the Mr. Bean that you know. His name is Robert Bean, Bob Bean, and a fabulous gentleman, a brilliant broker and a technocrat and leader. And he was instrumental in setting up with the chairman at that time, the London office. But they employed people from the London market. But then they said, how do we serve our international network? Because Johnson Higgins, although privately owned, rather than the Marsh or the Willis or whatever, was probably renowned for its international network. They had offices in literally everywhere. South America, in Asia, they had it all the way down to Singapore, to Japan, and everything else. So they had to say, how do we serve the needs of our? That was our formula of success, where people from London can help the guy in Taiwan, people in can help the guy in Peru or whatever.
Yeah. So looking at, because I know you also spent some time in your career in Lebanon. You also spent some time back in Malaysia after this again. And I guess my question is, how does when you're looking at country to country differences, right? What are the big things that kind of throw into your face, right? Well, what are the big factors that are incredibly different when you're talking about a London office, when you're talking about a Lebanon office, when you're talking about a Malaysia office, right? Because I can talk about this from a Canada-London perspective, right?
Yeah.
But even then, I think that there's probably major differences. What would you say are kind of the things that really change fundamentally?
Well, working for Johnson Higgins, who eventually got acquired by Marsh, right? You can see the fundamental difference within how the American insurance market works versus the London insurance market, which the London insurance market is more, I would say, more international. They have an understanding of what happens in the boons, Mongolia or whatever else, whereas the American market is very insular.
Yeah.
It's very much, and an American market never had to go out of America. Only a decade or two ago they decided to.
I mean, it makes sense. I remember seeing some from the National Insurance Institute in America, where they describe capacity as domestic capacity and alien capacity, right? So outside of the country. In Canada, it was domestic and foreign, right? But in the rest of the world, it's retail, that domestic capacity, and wholesale, that international capacity that London provides. But what about with between Malaysia and London?
Malaysia, the insurance industry in Malaysia is the most Malaysia Singapore is the most mature, purely because of British colonial rule.
Yeah.
So it's obvious. It's like India. India, the insurance industry is it evolved from the British system in a sense. So that's the good part about it. So it was a direct connection with London, whereas I guess the rest of the world is not. So, but at the end of the day, claim to fame is insurance is very much a British thing.
Yeah.
It started with Edward Lloyd in the Lloyd Coffee House and things like that. So it is very much a British framework, and even Americans can call it, it's unique in America, that sort of thing. They just call things different. We call it British would call it fire and perils insurance. Americans call it property damage and property damage insurance. So it's just a terminology, but the fundamental basic platform of insurance is the same. So you can apply it in Chile, in America, in Papua New Guinea if you want to, so it is. Uh, so
100%.
Malaysia is very unique in that sense. So even our laws are very much British laws, common law. So if you look at Thailand, there's no such thing as common law.
Mm.
Whereas, as I said, insurance is an industry very legal oriented.
Yeah, I mean, we say this all the time on the podcast that it is very based on the specific wording is incredibly important within
Yes.
insurance, right? And I guess so. You've worked in so many different places. You have all these different perspectives from different company cultures and things like that.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a little bit of an age gap between you and I, right? But when you first started, there was
have we? No, yes. Yeah.
but when you first started, there was, an age gap between when your age at the time and some of the older people who you worked with, right? When you think about these generational differences, right? You think about the current generation of brokers, right? You think about the brokers when, you were at your prime and you were, the boss and you and then versus when you first started. How do you see or highlight those generational differences, right? Because there's different technology, there's different risks, there's different circumstances.
Well, I think in those days, technology was not as prevalent as now. So your learning curve as a young insurance practitioner was very much driven by the veterans, and they'll tell you, I said, look, this is what an insurer's role is. This is what a broker's role is. This is what an adjuster's role, and every step of the way. So your learning curve was very much direct, whereas now it's it's a combination. Like it's overwhelmed by technology. I mean, I'm not saying that technology is great, and maybe because I'm old school, it's technology can either be good for you or it could destroy you.
Yeah.
So, but technology should be embraced for what its value is. So I think there is a challenge, and I think even most organizations now, whether it's broking and insurance, loss adjusting, there's a challenge between the veterans and the new set of people coming in, and I think companies should be more focused on making sure that there's nothing wrong about how it was done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you from someone who was young at a brokerage that companies have no problem saying that things were done okay in the past, right? So I remember the exact same thing when I worked at Aon, right? There was a generational gap, and there was this kind of conflict around change, right? Which parts are going to change naturally, and which parts should not change because we've always done them one way, right?
Yeah.
When you think about how processes changed, right, from your perspective, when you first started and perhaps things were a little bit manual, I know you had mentioned that Higgins had a really good claims system. When you then went to Marsh and, they had been working on different projects. I recall hearing about this, hardwired data transfer, and then the internet came. When you think about change from your career length, what would you say was probably the biggest jump in change, right? At some point, was there a big cultural shift that happened, reflecting back?
I think there has been. It's become very transactional. You buy a product. But at the end of the day, even when you sell the product, that product has to make sense. So it's not just about buying the product. I mean, if you buy a car, you're going to check, does this car got 4 tires? Do I need a spare tire, or is it flat run tires, whatever, right? Insurance is the same. But what's happened now is, just buy the insurance. You don't have, so, and that is where it's going to impact industry, and technology can help make a difference in that. So part of any technology that an insurance industry do, broking or what, particularly the broking, because we are intermediaries. Don't forget, brokers are not paid by the insurance company. Brokers are paid by the clients. And if you ask a lot of brokers, they say, "Oh no, I get my commission from the insurance company." Nope, you get paid by the client. So if you, Casper, you're using a broker, you should expect a service level agreement from them.
Mm.
Which at one point I learned that's the promise I make to my client. Now a service level agreement, it's there, but it's not utilized. I've seen brokers doing this to our clients, and now I'm a risk advisor, so I sit on the client side, and I said to them, I said, no, I'm not going to take your money away, but you're going to have to work for your living, which is where the fundamental change is happening, So, and I think the brokers can do this even more efficiently with technology,
Yeah.
But
So, when you're looking at that difference, right? So you said you're a risk advisor, right? So the fundamental difference there for people who may not be aware is that, like you said, you are fully on the broker side here. So the fundamental difference there between being a risk advisor and being a broker is that now you're entirely hired by the client, right? You're obviously before you were still being paid because of that, the commission is an extra that then gets paid from the client is ending up paying that. But what is the difference now that you see in your role as a risk advisor versus the role you did as a broker, right? Because a big part of broking is advisory. Right? It is
yes,
risk advisory. But there must be some fundamental difference there because you're not the one going to market anymore necessarily. You are helping people find brokers, you're helping people find the market, or
a combination of both. I mean, what with the experience I have, and some of my partners who are all people of the same age and people of the same experience, is that we want to make a change, and we want to tell them you need brokers, because at the end of the day, the transactions has to be done through a licensed entity, and it's good governance, right? But the brokers now, hopefully, what we do will impart some actually self-realization that say, I've got to be doing more advisory work, uh, like now you get I tell you what, the typical method that's used globally when you appoint a broker, it's called a broker of record letter. It's one page.
yeah.
I said, come on, 1 page. I mean, okay, I go back to history. You say I was in Johnson Higgins. I was working in London in the reinsurance market. I was serving the Johnson Higgins network. But I was sort of the Far Eastern desk executive. I wouldn't call expert, but I was a slave. So anything that comes from Taiwan, I'm in London. I'm the one running around to the market to help. To help broke the business to the London market, sort of thing. So then I got an opportunity by Mr. Bean. He called me and says, "We want you to go back and to be the country manager in Malaysia." So I was very young, comparably. I was very young. And I said to Mr. Bean, I said, "Can I think about this? This is a bit of a big challenge. Not because I didn't like working in London, or whatever, or didn't want to go back to Malaysia, but to tell you the truth, I 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, I went back to Mr. Bean and said, Bob, you've offered me this job. This is great, but why did you choose me? Just it because I'm Malaysian, and you want the American guy who was CEO there to deploy him somewhere else, He says, no, quote unquote, he said to me. As I say, he's a great bloke, a bit of Latino background. I'm not sure. He says, Razak, yeah, you're a damn good broker. And then he said, you're a damn good broker. You can sell my underwear 3 times over to me again. And I said, wow, is that a compliment? I'm wearing the same underwear 3 times, but you sold it over to me 3 times. Is that a compliment? I said, yeah. So, okay, thank you very much. It's a very good compliment that you say that I can broke a risk quite well. But I must say, the company did not teach me how to manage a business or to lead a business. It's a different ballgame.
100%.
Yeah, being a broker and leading the business. So that's where he said, "Yeah, you're true." I said, "Don't worry, will go through the motion, that will get you that sort of experience before you take over the. So when I took over and led the Malaysian office, I was the first. I was proud to be it. I was the first Asian to be the country manager for the offices that they had throughout, from Japan down
Oh wow.
to Indonesia.
Yeah.
So
So as someone who became leader of a of a region, of a department, what are some of the, because you said it's obviously different from being a broker, being a manager. What are some of those differences that you realized, and how do you effectively manage broking teams?
well, I had as I said, I had the luxury of taking charge there, and it was a bit of a challenge in the initial stages. And I felt the first year, to tell the truth, taking over, I was struggling. You think being a big cheese, being a big CEO in an organization in Malaysia, is a big thing. I must say, I was 34 years old.
Yeah.
So but then we had with the encouragement of the leadership in New York, he basically said, it's your call. You have to make it or break it. So we changed our model, and I'm proud to say the first thing I looked at was finding the right sort of talent to bring
Yeah.
to the broking team. And we had, I went around hiring people, some of them older than me at that time, so, and in fact, I remember I was 10 years on the job as a CEO of Marsh in Malaysia, to the exact date, 10 years, when I was given the job, and then when I decided to resign. And we had a great team, and we built the business exponentially. We were champions in every key industry, but the difference is that the team was backed by the international network with expertise, technical expertise. So they bring something to the table to a client in Malaysia. We dealt with as complex as satellite insurance.
Yeah. I mean, the whole conversation around like talent and conversation about building that team is incredibly important. It's still really important today, right? We can talk as much as we want about having good technology, about having good infrastructure, but at the end of the day, it is a talent-based industry, right? So I guess that it kind of leads into, how do you identify good talent, right? How do you recognize, okay, this guy's going to be good? Not just someone you've worked with in the past, they left, you hired, you stole them back, right? But how do you identify new good talent? And then how do you foster good talent, right? Because this is something that is getting incredibly more important nowadays with AI, right? We had a conversation with a broker who said that the junior staff at their firm are getting from 0 to 100 so much faster than before, right? We're talking 4 to 8 weeks before they can start fully managing clients on their own, fully go out and broke business. The problem is that they're not going through the same steps to get there because of things like AI, because of things like technology, and they're not learning the lessons that they maybe should learn along the way. What do you think? So I guess it's 3 questions. How do you identify the right talent? How do you foster the right talent? And then what do you think about this modern situation that's kind of occurring with this new talent?
Well, I say I never went to management school or whatever it is, but I did remember. I think it was Jack Welch who says the difference between a leader and a manager. A manager you can find anywhere. A leader, it's something different. Someone who's got leadership skills, they're thinking 5 steps ahead. So I forced myself to think as a leader, and how to develop talent was how to attract talent. In fact, industry in Malaysia at that time was accusing me of saying, you're paying your people too much. But I said, look, we're paying our people too much because we expect them. we want them to be the top of creme de la creme in the industry.
High pay, high expectations.
High expectations. I mean, I said to them, my management meetings, I remember this, in my management meetings, and they said, guys, what do I pay you? Whatever, right? So whatever I pay you, I'm expecting double minimum. So if I pay you $10,000 a month, you should be bringing $20,000 a month. That is return on investment. That was a simple management mantra I had, and everybody said, so you want 10,000? I'll give it to you, but please give me 20. And I'll tell you what, the team I had, we were probably about 80 or 85 in strength. We were the top broker in Malaysia. We focused on the talent, and we focused on industry or class of business. We did all the infrastructure projects. We were number one in power and utilities, for example. The biggest client I had as Marsh, not me, but as a client, as Marsh, was the national utility company, the power company. And you talk about this, how we serve them. We serve them by saying that we're doing it on a fee. We're not doing although we do earn reinsurance commission, but that is a job. But point is, we explain to the client, it's a supply chain, and there's a fee for every service that you're giving. But the retail fee, that was the biggest retail fee we got one client. It was, I remember this, it was 30 billion in asset, ringgit, which is still whatever currency, is huge. And they had a loss ratio of 120%. They had their bloody power plants burning or whatever. But we managed to secure that. But we dedicated the team, which even our local team had some knowledge, but not enough. But it must be supported by people from London, people from the US, people from wherever.
Yeah. So when it comes to fostering talent, when it comes to this knowledge gap that we're seeing in these newer generations, it does have a lot to do with their ability to leverage other people within their network, right? Like, how can you leverage your team to learn from your team?
Correct.
Right? And I guess that kind of brings us to our final question a little bit. We talked about this, and it's come up a lot actually in our conversation, in the sense that Higgins, Marsh, they were able to provide that international support, right? And it kind of leads to the last topic that I want to talk about, which is, what is the inherent value of the broker versus the inherent value of the brokerage, right? So the brokerage, they have these teams, they have claims, they have, risk consultants that come on, they have, other services that they provide. I know some like Aon, Marsh, they're trying to become more like professional services firms, so they can provide many, many services even outside insurance. Yeah. And then there's the individual broker. He has his own network. He has his own specialty. He may have a background in a specific subsect, right? Like, you worked within loss adjustment, so you're able to really leverage that type of information within your claims. Where do you see the clearest gap between the value of the broker versus the value of the brokerage, right?
Well, the value of broker is, as I said, maybe the best analogy is, why do you employ a lawyer when you get into trouble, right? Because you don't have a clue how it is. And the lawyers, they're the ones that make a lot of money, even from the insurance industry. So, but the same thing, the brokers have to realize the fact that they bring a great value to the client. If I was a young broker now, which I do now as a risk advisor, again, my first question to a lot of my clients is that, why do you buy insurance? And I'm talking this message. I tell CEOs and chairmen of the boards, why do you buy insurance? The client hasn't a clue. Oh, we are corporate, so we have to buy insurance to protect our assets. Yeah, okay. How much do you spend in insurance? But except the CFO, even the CEO sometimes don't know how much you spend. And it is, at least in most industries, in most companies, it's a top 10 expenditure. But nobody knows that it's a top 10 expenditure. You know, it's not a direct cost of insurance. It's indirect. Your suppliers or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then also it ends up being like a ripple effect, right?
yeah,
Because it ends up being that, like, if your insurance policy says you need to have good maintenance skills, guess what? You're going to spend less money rebuying equipment all the time. They're doing it for a reason, right?
yes,
No, sorry, continue.
yeah. So no, I mean, so that's what it is. So and then so they say, oh, they don't know what they spend, and then I said, so what's your advice? I said, listen, if you don't need insurance, don't buy it. That's my advice. You buy insurance based on your risk exposure. You don't buy it if you don't have a risk exposure.
Yeah.
If the risk exposure is manageable, which in some instances, it's always manageable, but you didn't realize it. So the broker can make that difference. If they sell it on that approach, I think they probably make more brokerage. So, but but they don't. So that to me is and unfortunately, this is across where my career. As I said, I worked in Malaysia as well. I worked in London. I worked in Malaysia. I was helping Marsh. We were quite good in terms of our regional coordination, and in fact, when one of the things that we had, you think they'll be different. It's different territories, different approach. Actually, it's not. I worked as I said, I worked in Lebanon and the Middle East. It's not. Even that, very British based. The insurance industry is very British based. Dubai or Saudi or even Lebanon. So so my experience is across the board. As I said, I've been a loss adjuster in an insurance company. This is after the fact, after I've left Marsh, in particularly in the Middle East, where I was working for a group which had insurance company, and insurance broker, and buying a lot of insurance because they're in construction and development and all that. So I had to coordinate. I was a de facto chief risk officer, so I had to get involved in everything. So, but
Yeah, I mean,
the platform is no different.
I mean, at the end of the day, insurance is a risk industry, right? I mean, I worked within risk management within a bank, right? And at the end of the day, the main priority you should have is mitigation. How much risk can we mitigate by having better culture, better practices, whatever?
Yeah.
And then afterwards, it's how much can we transfer? And that's what insurance is at the end of the day. How much of this risk can we transfer away from us? We do have to start to slowly wrap up, but I was wondering if you had one message to, someone my age, someone a producer Harsh's age, who's looking to enter the industry. What would be your one piece of advice in terms of how they can best excel and grow in their career?
Oh, that's a lot, but one piece of advice. One piece of advice is that I guess you used the word of Stephen Covey. Start with the end in mind. Yeah. What is that end game that you want to be? So, if you see, even today, if you want to encourage, I try to encourage young people to enter insurance, because one of the small business I've got in Malaysia is that I help promote the CRI in UK insurance courses and qualification. Very challenging, So I go to university. I try to say them, because the industry that's more attractive now is securities market, banking, that sort of thing, but never insurance. So, but as I say, start with the end in mind, because the insurance industry is still untapped. So for a young person, if you're just average in an insurance industry, you're a bright spark. If you go to banking, your competition is about, in one floor is 100 people. So whereas in insurance, there's still room to expand, because insurance touches every part of life.
Yeah,
as I said,
yes.
In my experience, you want me to do a bit of BS on power generation? I can give you a clue, because I learned.
I mean, there are so many specialties. There are so many different products and subsectors within the insurance industry. I think not only is Think of the End a great ironic twist to the fact that we are at the end of the podcast, but I also think that it's a fantastic way to help you steer where you want to go, right?
Yes.
Like try to figure out where you want to end up. What kind of industry do you want to end up in? What kind of subsector of insurance do you want to end up in? And be very active in trying to reach that goal. Thank you so much, Razak,
Yeah.
for coming on today. We may have him on again in the future if we are so lucky. But thank you so much.
Yeah.
This has been the Coverage and Coffee podcast. My name is Casper Harsey.
And I'm Razak Shakor.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you.